Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to my channel. Tonight, I just got back from seeing Resident Evil: Welcome to Raccoon City. Before we start this review, I'm just going to say full disclosure. There's gonna be spoilers in it, a lot of spoilers. If you haven't seen the movie and you want to, go watch it first, then come back here. Also, I'm just going to point out, I am not a Resident Evil fanatic. The only two games I've ever played were Biohazard and Village. But I have seen gameplay on YouTube, so I kind of have like an idea of what the story is for every other game in the series, as well as sort of like what the characters' personalities are. So let's just get on with the review. So I'll be honest, when I first saw the trailer for Resident Evil, I did not have high hopes for it. Like, I had little to no faith in this film at all, mostly because of who the cast was, who was behind it, and just how the trailer looked in general. So to start off with the cast, like, nobody in like the main character list really stood out to me. Like, you have Kaya Scodelario, I don't know if I'm saying her name right, who she was in a horror movie that was featuring crocodiles at one point. But I more know her from the last Pirates of the Caribbean movie where she was Barbossa's daughter. And, well, she wasn't really the main focus of that film in the first place. Then you got Robbie Amell, who's playing Chris Redfield, and sorry to say, but I feel like Robbie Amell's biggest claim to fame is the fact that he's Stephen Amell's brother. Now, I could be wrong on that because I haven't seen him in too much, but something tells me that I'm right on the money, that he's only really famous because his brother played the Green Arrow. Then you got Hannah John Cameron, if I said that name right, or if I even said the correct name. I just know that she played Ghost in Ant-Man and the Wasp. She was Jill Valentine. And then that's really it for the main characters. I don't know who played Leon Kennedy. You do have Donald Logan there as the police chief, and you also have Neil Mcdonough as basically the main villain of the movie, William Birkin. And you do have this guy named Tom Hopper as Albert Wesker. I don't know who Tom Hopper is. I haven't seen him in anything else, to be honest. So when I saw the trailer, my first prediction was that Neil Mcdonough and Donald Logue would probably be the best parts of the whole movie, and I was right. Mostly because Donald Logue kind of like chews up the scenery. Like, I loved him as Harvey Bullock in Gotham, and I'm always happy to see him in like other movies, just because like he's one of those actors who I feel can just ham up a scene, and it can get lots of laughs out of everyone, even when it's like a really serious movie. And that's how I felt when I was watching every scene with him in it. Neil Mcdonough, he's kind of similar, where if he's playing a villain, like, you can tell that he enjoys doing it just because of how much fun he has on screen. And that's where my half right comes in, because for pretty much every scene that he was in, except for the final few scenes of the film, he just felt like a cold, lifeless character up until like the last 10-15 minutes. But that was just my opinion on it. So then the other reason that I thought this movie wouldn't do well was because of who was behind the film, and I'm not meaning the director. I don't know who the director was. I can't even remember the name. but the name Paul W.S. Anderson stood out to me, and the reason for that is because he was, I believe he, I believe he was the writer for all of the previous Resident Evil movies, the one that starred Mila Jovovich, and he was also the director for, I think, 4 out of 6 of them, but I'm not too sure about that one either. So when I saw his name in the trailer credits as executive producer, I didn't have a good feeling about that, especially because if I recall correctly, executive producers have quite a bit of power in movie production. I think almost as much as the director, because like they're the ones who are actually funding this. But again, I could be wrong on that one, so don't quote me on that. And then the third reason why the trailer didn't give me high hopes was just for the CGI. Like that moment in the trailer where it shows like the liquor from that was introduced in Resident Evil 2, I think. The CGI just looked awful to me. So I'll be honest, I did not have high hopes going into this film. And when I went and saw it, I will admit, I had a lot more fun than I thought I was going to have. But there were still plenty of problems with it. So onto the film itself, the story, if I remember correctly, the story is basically combining the first 2 games, Resident Evils 1 and 2. And the only reason why I really know this is because Resident Evil 1 focused more on like Jill and Chris, and I think even Wesker, and then Resident Evil 2 focused more on Claire and Leon. But here they had like all the characters coming together, which was nice, because I don't remember a single game where like all 4 of those characters are actually like in the same room, except for their DLC in Dead by Daylight. But the story for me at least was pretty simple. Claire Redfield returns to Raccoon City after years of running away, and she tries to get Chris to look at this conspiracy about the Umbrella Corporation turning the citizens into like monsters and bioweapons. Sorry, I just remember that that's not what happened at all in the actual movie. In the trailer it did, but not in the movie. So what the story actually was where Claire showed Chris that, but he brushed her off, and he went to go to the police station with Wesker, Jill, and Leon, and they ended up investigating the Spencer Manor from the first game. Meanwhile, Claire more or less fights her way to the police department when stuff really hits the fan, and like all the citizens in the city are just roaming around freely, and she meets up with Leon and Donald Logue's character at the precinct. And then that's really all the story was. Either that, or I'm missing huge chunks of it. But the horror elements were pretty good here. This has kind of become a trend with like just Resident Evil in general, where I find like one thing early in the games that that are just really creepy, and then like that's just the peak for me, and everything else just isn't scary anymore. Like back during Biohazard, it was when Mia is like seemingly hurting herself, or it was like Evelyn doing it to her. In Village, it was like when Cassandra first attacks Ethan and a couple of her flies burst out of his hand. But this time here, there's actually quite a few scenes that were really creepy, where like the whole opening sequence that takes place in the Raccoon City orphanage, that whole thing was like unsettling to me, and it actually makes me kind of want to see a game uh, where like say you're like a teenager or you're a worker at the orphanage, and like the orphanage is overrun with zombies, and like it could like take place during the events of the first two, and you're just fighting your way out of the orphanage. I think that would actually be pretty dang creepy. But the whole that whole sequence was pretty creepy for me. And then sprinkled throughout the rest of the movie are these really good scenes where like the zombies like slowly come in from the background, or there's this one moment where Leon, Wesker, and Jill are in a diner, and as they're leaving, the waitress has like blood trickling out of her eyeball, and it's just shot in the way where it's like not calling attention to it at first, but if you notice it, it will come off as like more or less disturbing. So that's all kind of pretty cool. Unfortunately, there is quite a bit of jump scares, but for the really slow scares of like showing the zombies just slowly approaching the characters before they let out that ear-splitting screech, I can really appreciate those little moments. And speaking of appreciating some moments, like I said, I haven't played the games, but I do like the small little details they have where like whenever Leon is running around, well, walking around the precinct, and he has his gun on him, he's always like holding it up, kind of like that. And if I'm right, that's exactly how his character would always hold it while you're running in Resident Evil 2. So that was a nice little detail. Um, the action is pretty good. There's one sequence towards the middle or end of the film where Chris is like in the dark and he's by himself, and he's fighting this huge horde of zombies, and he does like a spray burst of gunfire, and every time he pulls the trigger, there's a muzzle flash that gives you like little snippets of himself just killing the zombies. And usually I'm one who like wants to see like the full-on carnage of a scene, but here I think it really worked for him to be in complete darkness with only a few flashes of what was going on. Um, hmm. And that's really it for the positive things that I found in the movie. Like I said, Donald Logue and Neil Mcdonough, they pretty much stole the scenes they were in, or at least Donald Logue did with his comedic chops. It really felt like he brought in. It really felt like he channeled his Harvey Bullock from Gotham when he played that police chief. That and sprinkling in a few F-bombs in there. Neil Mcdonough, he was okay. I've seen him do better on Arrow. Like I know that season 4 isn't really loved, but I really liked Damien Dark as a character, because at least the actor looked like he was having fun in the role. but here he just feels too stoic for about 80% of his screen time. So that's all the positives. There's really not much for me to say on what I didn't like, because I think all of this would attribute to the games themselves. And I guess one of the things that I didn't exactly enjoy was how uncharacteristic some of the characters feel. And again, haven't played the game, so I don't know if they're like this in like the early games. But Chris feels a bit too stupid, and Leon Kennedy feels like too much of a wimp. Like Leon particularly. I don't know if he was like that in Resident Evil 2, but in Resident Evil 4 onward, he's supposed to come off as like the cool, charismatic guy. Never mind the fact that they screwed up his haircut. But in Resident Evil 2, he feels like too much of a pansy, and I don't know if that's who he was in... Sorry, let me rephrase that. In this movie, he felt like too much of a pansy, and I'm not sure if that was because of... because that's who his character was in the second game or not, being that he was a rookie cop. But oftentimes he came off as annoying. And same with Chris. He came off as too stupid, like he couldn't handle himself or anything. I don't know if that was who his character was in the very first game, because I know him more like from Village and Resident Evil 5, and I guess some of that stupidity I can kind of forgive, because like he did do a couple stupid things in Village, such as never telling Ethan Winters that the person he shot in his house was not his wife and it was Mother Miranda. But he just came off as like even dumber than what he should be. Like William Burke and Neil McDonough's character, he said it best later in the film. Like, how could Chris be so stupid while Claire be so smart? But that's really it for kind of the characters side. Some of them just came off as like they weren't following their characters from the games. And like I said, I don't know if that's how they were in the actual games, but I just did not like them in the movie. Oh, and one more character, Albert Wesker. I haven't really talked about him, and that's why there's not really too much for me to talk about with him. I've never seen his appearance from the first Resident Evil game. I only know him from his appearance in Resident Evil 5, so obviously this is supposed to be like before he becomes the sunglasses wearing guy who can like matrix out of bullets. But for the first Resident Evil game, I'm not sure if he started out as part of STARS or not, the elite team that Chris Redfield is part of, but to me, this version of Wesker didn't really feel like Wesker. Like the first scene that we see him, Jill, and technically Leon in is in a bar, and Wesker is wearing flannel, and he's having a bet with Jill, who they were in a romantic relationship in this film, or at least it was hinted at. They were having a bet that she couldn't knock this ketchup bottle off of Leon's head while he's sleeping. And something tells me that I won't really see anything like that in the games if I ever decide to play the first game. But when I think of Albert Wesker, it's definitely not a guy with with about a week-old beard and some flannel. But then at the very end of the movie, there is a post-credit scene. This is where the spoilers comes in. He turns out he's brought back to life after getting shot by Jill, for betraying everyone, and he gets brought back, and he gets his iconic sunglasses, and to me, he just doesn't look intimidating when he puts them on. Like, I don't know if you guys say, but I have a little bit of a beard. Like, he looks like me, like right now, and like I don't think I'm intimidating at all. But they, at the very least, when they killed him and then he got brought back to life, they should have shaved his beard and mustache, because when he puts on his sunglasses, I kind of laughed in the theater because he looks like a college frat boy who got hung over. But as for that post-credit scene, so it turns out it was revealed that that Wesker isn't working for Umbrella like he is in the video games. He's working for somebody else. And the person who brought him back was Ada Wong from the video games. And from the way it looked like from the post-credit scene, it looks like Wesker is basically going to be a lackey for Ada Wong, or whoever she works for. And I'm going out on a limb and guessing that it was the other way around in the video games. Now, if it's just gonna be where Wesker is whatever company was technically employing him, whatever company he's working for, if he's just a guard dog for them, that just doesn't really seem intimidating, unless if he just kills every single one of them in the next film, if there is a next film. But I honestly do not see that happening. Well, okay, maybe a little bit. Before I forget this, speaking of that terrible CGI from the trailer, it rears its head again here, and I don't think there's a lot of CGI in this film, or at least if there is, then sometimes the CGI is great, and sometimes it isn't. There's a scene where a helicopter crashes into the mansion, which I'm pretty sure that's CGI, but it was done really well. It looked real, and there's just some moments where the CGI looks great, and sometimes where it just looks awful. Unless if those great moments are actually just practical effects, in that case, the CGI is just god-awful for the entire thing. But it's just really noticeable whenever there are these... whenever, the creatures show up that, aren't even zombies. There's a couple times where you have these... undead birds, crows or something, that... they smash into the diner's window at the beginning of the film, and then there's another that gets a little bit too close to Wesker, and Jill ends up shooting it, where just the way they move, it just looks awful, and you know that it's not real. Or that demon dog that was also in the trailer that was attacking Donald Logue's character. The CGI for that looks awful. Honestly, they should have got a trained dog. The liquor that was in the trailer, somehow the CGI for that looks even worse in the final film, just because of the way it moves around. It just looks awful. And then the final monster that William Birkin transforms into just looks atrocious. which is weird because like when Birkin first mutates and like his right arm is completely mutated, like there's spikes coming out and stuff. There's that huge eyeball on the shoulder, and like half his face looks like it's about to split open. That looks pretty good, which I'm pretty sure now that that's just special effects and maybe a little bit of CGI so that the eyes are moving around. But when he transforms into his final form, it just looks like crap, which sucks. Really, it does. Because it just feels like they blew out their budget on the CGI, or maybe they spent too much money on the music, which is one other thing that I didn't really like, the placement of music. It feels like they got like way too many like popular songs into the film at some of the weirdest of times too. Like they're that song from the trailer that was playing, I can't remember what it was. They had Leon Kennedy listening to that while a zombie that was engulfed in flames was coming towards him, but Leon was sleeping, and the music only stopped the moment Donald Logue shot the zombie to death. And then there was just these other, there were these other kind of pop songs that were thrown in, like especially at the beginning when like you're first introduced to Leon and Chris as adults at least. And then this whole thing really just felt like CW made for TV movie or CW miniseries just with a higher budget. Like if they took the budget of Superman and Lois and lowered the CGI portion of the money coming in, you could probably get an idea of the quality of Resident Evil Welcome to Raccoon City. And I have heard that Superman and Lois is a really good TV show, but at the end of the day, it's a TV show. But and that's not necessarily a bad thing. So the whole reason why I say that, why the movie just felt like something that you'd see on the CW, is mostly because of Robbie Amell's inclusion and the little hinted love triangle between Chris, Jill, and Wesker. But that was never really explored on. Just a few passing references, mostly from Claire and I think Wesker himself. But no, mostly about its structure, though, is kind of what makes it feel like a TV show, because you keep on jumping back and forth between Chris, then Wesker and Jill, then Claire and Leon, and at one point you even jump to William Birkin, and like that's basically 4 parties that you keep jumping around from in the entire film, until they all converge at the very end. And that's kind of that's pretty much the exact structure of a CW show, or pretty much any TV show now, where it follows like multiple characters at different times and they don't converge until either at the end of the episode or the end of the season. And I'm sorry, but that's what the film ultimately came off as, a higher than average budget miniseries. But all in all, it was a good film. It was a much better faithful adaptation than the Mila Jovovich movies, despite still having Paul W.S. Anderson's hands on it. So I guess to wrap this all up, because I feel like I've been rambling along way too long. If you're a fan of zombie movies and horror movies, I think you'll like this one. If you're a fan of Resident Evil, especially the first few games, you probably won't like this one based on how the characters act. But again, that could be how they were in the first two video games. I'm not sure. I'm kind of basing my opinions on like Chris and Leon and Jill, mostly solely based on Resident Evils 4, 5, and 6. So if they were like that during the first two games, I will fully admit that I had no knowledge of that. But as it stands, I did not like how their characters acted in this film. So if you're a fan of Resident Evil, it's a pretty faithful adaptation. It's just the characters might rub you the wrong way. So that's it. That's it for me. You guys all have a good night. Once you do see the movie, I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on this too. Bye.